So the topic today is about a quality formula for interviewing candidates. So if you happen to be in a position, a lot of small businesses are, a lot of big companies are right now, where now that COVID is starting to be at least mostly in the rear view mirror, at least we hope so anyway, people are starting to hire. That we put off some of those hiring decisions for quite a while. And so what I want to do is do a couple of sessions on how to kind of identify really quality candidates for positions that you have open, and also maybe give you some questions that you can ask and some ways to identify whether or not a person who is applying for a job that you're offering might be a good candidate for that specific position. Now, if you are not in a position where you're hiring, maybe you're going to be on the other side where you are interviewing with people to get a new position. The information can help you as well. So in fact, I'm going to kind of give a little subtitle here. It's about job interview tips. So that's whether you're on the interviewer side or to the interviewee side. These are going to be some interview tips to help you make, at least from the interviewer side, the best hiring decisions. I'll give you a little bit of background. So over the years, I've just so you know, I've made some stellar hiring decisions. I have hired some really, really quality folks. On the other hand, I have also made some catastrophic blunders as well when hiring people. And eventually, I kind of figured out a system that has really allowed me to hire excellent candidates with low turnover. And that's actually fairly recent. I've been in business for 20 years or so, but this is it's the system that we've created is something that works really, really well. I think you're going to get a kick out of it. And by the way, I had to learn these tips through the School of Hard Knocks. I mean, I made every mistake in the book. So hopefully you'll be able to learn from my mistakes so you can create a solid team for your organization. But part one, what we're going to cover today, gives you a few tips to help you really identify the perfect candidate when you see him or her, when you're interviewing that person, how to know whether or not that person is quality for your organization. The next part is going to offer questions to ask during the job interview. So I'll give you a list of questions that will help you better compare the candidates and see which ones are really in line with what you need for the position. And I also kind of inserted a little mini part on questions to avoid during the job interview. So again, School of Hard Knocks, things that you probably want to stay away from in the job interview in order to, just in some states, you can get yourself into legal problems just by asking the wrong questions, even though it's for a lot of us, those questions might seem kind of natural to ask. And in some places, they can actually get you into trouble as an employer. And then the last part is going to cover how to use the information that you've collected during the interview process to make a good hiring decision. So let's get started with the first part, with that first section. So basically, how do you know if a candidate is really a good fit for the job that you have or for your particular company? So before you start to interview candidates, you really want to identify what a good candidate looks like. And there've been times in my company, by the way, where we were growing so fast that our hiring decisions were made based on if a person had a pulse or not. If the person had a pulse, yeah, you're hired, right? It's just we had so much business that we had to have bodies. We had to have, and by the way, in my industry, and especially with the team that I have here, a lot of those hiring decisions, even though they were kind of made in haste and without a whole lot of due diligence, I guess, most of them actually turned out really, really well. And the reason why is a little bit different because we are a company of trainers. I mean, basically, I'm a trainer. All of my executives are trainers. So even if somebody is not quite a good fit, we have the ability to be able to train somebody, and over time, they can become a good fit. And most organizations don't have that. Most organizations don't have a situation where they've got a kind of free training for the new people. So we have to when we're making hiring decisions, we have to kind of keep that in mind as well. And by the way, some of those rash hiring decisions that I talked about, turned out really well. I kind of mentioned that, but a lot of times it was based on just dumb luck. And then other hiring decisions cause, really big problems and uncomfortable terminations and that kind of thing. So hopefully you can kind of learn from our mistakes. Just so you know, I mean, just as background, most interviewers, most employers will start by scanning a candidate's resume or LinkedIn profile. And what we're looking for a lot of times in the early parts are things like education, what's their degree in, that kind of thing. What kind of work experience do they have? Do they have references? And obviously you want to take these items into consideration. However, none of those things that I just mentioned, the things that we tend to focus on most often in the interview, none of those things are going to tell you if that person is actually a good fit for the position that you're hiring. And in addition, none of those things are going to show you if that person is going to be a good fit for your team as well. So, it's hard to see that from a resume. So before you start interviewing, one of the things that I would suggest that you do is identify the skills that are needed for the particular job that you're going to be hiring for. And also the second part of that is to identify the values that you want in a candidate. If you have those two things clearly in mind when you get into that interview, when you start asking questions, it's going to help you better pick somebody that's going to fit in those two criteria. Number one, they have the skills that you need, and number two, they're going to fit in with your team and really build the team culture that you're looking for. So let's start with the first part. You want to identify the skills needed for the job before you interview any candidates. I'll give you a good example of this. A couple of years ago, I hired a new website developer for my company. And in the job description, and by the way, this was maybe in the last 2-3 years or so, this was probably about the 6th or 7th person that I'd hired during that time period. And so this was one of the latter ones. And I got a whole lot better at creating the job description by the time I did the last one than I was when I started the first one. But basically what I did in that particular job description is I inserted a list of skills needed for the position, and I listed them in the order of importance. I put the top one at the number one spot, the thing that was the skill that was most important to a person's success. And by the way, what I listed in this particular job description was the phrase search engine optimization. And that was the first skill that a person in this position working for me needed. And by the way, I listed that one first for a reason, because the candidate absolutely had to have a vast knowledge of the subject of search engine optimization, how to get websites to the top of Google or how to keep them at the top of Google in order to be successful in the position, because that's one of the big things that we do here at our company. If you've ever done a search for public speaking classes or public speaking training or leadership development or team building, a lot of times our websites are going to come up in, one of those first 10 anyway. In a lot of situations, the first 3, we had a lot of business because of it. And as a result, that was kind of key. So I listed those skills, and just so you kind of get an idea of why I focused a lot on the skills needed for that position, is because, that candidate, whoever that person is that's interviewing, they might have developed the skills by going to college or university. They might have developed the skills on the job working for a huge company, or he or she might have developed those skills working on the weekends as a second job, part-time. Guess what? I didn't care. I didn't care how that person came about that. I didn't care what school that she attended, or I really didn't care about her grades either. I was most concerned that she could prove to me that she was an expert in that particular skill. She had to be able to prove that she had that skill and that her skill was going to add to the value of our team here at the company. So step one, and a lot of, by the way, when you're interviewing, this is really one of those things. It's kind of like your own buying criteria. It's like a hierarchy that you're creating, where these are let's say you list a series of 10 different skill sets. One of the things that I would suggest is that when you complete that list, go back and then order them based on their importance. But the number one thing at the top, the second most important thing as number two, all the way down till you get to number 10. That way, once you start to interview candidates, you've got a checklist to refer to. You can ask questions about those specific skills to see if that person has experience and see what kind of experience that he or she has in each one of those skill sets. Well, in addition to the skills, I mean, the skills are really, really critical. I mean, in my company, especially when I'm hiring and when I suggest that my clients hire folks for their teams as well, I have them always start with the skills, because if somebody is highly skilled in an area, they add great value to the company. They add great value to what they're being added to. The second thing, though, is actually pretty important as well, because they may have the skills, but if they don't fit in well with the culture that you have, then they may not stick around very long. So you might have a higher turnover. So number two is that you want to identify the personality traits needed for the job before interviewing any of the candidates. So like for instance, when I say personality temperament, let me kind of explain what I'm talking about here. Psychologists have identified 4 major personality temperaments. And in fact, this theory is really, it's over 2,000 years old. It goes all the way back to Hippocrates, the guy who the doctors do the Hippocratic Oath, the do no harm, that kind of thing. He was in ancient Greece, I think 300 BC, somewhere around that time frame. And basically what he said was that each one of us, each person possesses natural talents based on their personality. But we also have equal and opposite weaknesses. We all have natural weaknesses. We're all good at something, and we're also not so good at other things. So this is really helpful, by the way, if you kind of understand this concept, because when you're actually in the hiring process, you can kind of look and see if the personality that the person has and those strengths that he or she has is really it's going to be helpful to that person in the role that they're applying for, or if they probably need a different position. So I'll give you a really good example of this. About 5 years ago, I had opened up a new warehouse for my company, actually here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area where we're based. Originally, our warehouse was in another city, and it got really challenging shipping materials and things like that from one. I mean, we had to basically ship a lot of materials here to our home, and which was kind of challenging. So basically, we moved the warehouse here to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and so I created a nice job posting and started interviewing candidates for a warehouse manager. And one of these candidates was just just a perfect fit for my company. She was energetic, she's fun, inspirational. Everybody in the office loved her, thought she'd be a great fit for the company. And instantly, I kind of knew it myself. Just asking her a few questions, it was really apparent that she was going to be helpful for us here at the company. However, the job that she was applying for, the warehouse manager, was really not a good fit for her strengths, right? I mean, what we really needed was someone that was thorough and detail oriented, and and we also needed somebody who could, do some fairly complicated mathematically anticipate inventory needs in the future based on past. But it's a fairly analytical type position, which wasn't really her strong suit. So unfortunately, I wasn't. I mean, well, fortunately for her, but I did not hire her for that specific position. But a couple of weeks later, I called her up out of the blue and I asked her to come in and re-interview for a totally different position. And she actually became an account manager for our company. And within, I think by the end of her second year, she was the top account manager in the entire company. So basically, she was generating more revenue for our company than anybody else in the world just in 2 years, which is unheard of. I mean, that's pretty challenging to do. And now 3 years after that, she's now one of our top instructors worldwide. So she goes out and teaches our team building programs and leadership development programs and stuff like that. And it's funny because every once in a while I kind of joke around with her saying, hey, what do you think your world would be like if I had actually offered you that warehouse manager job? And she always kind of grits her teeth and kind of under her breath thanks me, I think, anyway, because it was just not a good, what she probably would not have done very well, even though she's a perfect fit for the company. The personality, her strengths would not have fit well for that specific position. And so one of the key things to keep in mind when you are hiring is not only do you want to hire for skills within the that are needed for that particular position, but also look at what personality temperament, what kind of strengths and weaknesses are needed in order to be successful within that company. I'll give you another example of how, or a kind of tip anyway, kind of a bonus tip here about how personality temperaments can be helpful, because great teams contain individuals who really kind of complement each other's strengths and also make up for each other's weaknesses. So if you identify what strengths you already have on your team, and then at the same time identify what weaknesses that you need to kind of shore up on your team, the personality temperament strategy can really help here as well. For instance, like me personally, I'm a hard charging type A personality. People call me the bull in the china shop. That's kind of my, I'm going gangbusters after my goals, and I'm gonna get there no matter what. And the first, I would say 3 people or so that I ever hired for my company were the exact opposite of me. So where I'm kind of crass and blunt, the people that I hired were really friendly and personable. They made up for my deficiencies, and in some ways I kind of like to think that I made up for theirs as well. But we had really nice growth in that first couple of years of the company. We were growing like gangbusters, and eventually, though, the company kind of hit a plateau where we kind of petered out at a specific revenue plateau. It was about 300,000 a year, and I think a lot of companies kind of do that early on. And I realized later what the problem was. I mean, it took me a while. I mean, once we got over the next plateau and the next plateau and the next plateau, I kind of looked back, and in hindsight, it's real easy to kind of see that what had happened was I had hired a team of people who were waiting for me to give them direction. I mean, they were fantastic at implementing ideas, by the way. I mean, they were phenomenal. It's one of the reasons why we had such great growth. However, if I didn't lead them, if I didn't give them the idea, if I didn't kind of tell them what to do, if I wasn't giving them direction, not a whole lot got done. They just kind of went and did the things that I had already kind of told them how to do. So a couple of years later, when I hired some more, I hired creative idea people, these highly energetic folks like the woman I was telling you about before. And then later on, we hired a few detail-oriented, analytical folks. And when we started adding those additional personalities to the team, that's when growth really exploded. I mean, we went well over that. In fact, we went from about 300,000 to $1 million in the next year, and then a couple $1 million within 6 months from that time frame. So, I mean, it was a really, really fast growth once we started adding in some of those additional personalities. And so, as you are kind of looking at the people that you want to bring on, and you're going through the interview process, you might do kind of like what we've done, because today I consciously hire based on the strengths and weaknesses of the personalities that I already have on the team. And if you do the same, I think the process will work well for you as well.